Hi, everybody.
Hey!
Sasquatch aunties here.
We're back with a new story. We're super excited. We've had this one on the back burner like we told you, and so we're really excited that we're finally going to do this. We got an awesome few stories ahead of us.
Yeah, and I know you're going to enjoy them. The couple of them happened just a few miles from where we're sitting, so we're going to get right into it. Without further ado,
introduce our guest.
So tonight we have a gentleman here his name is KJ Bear Medicine, and he is from the Blackfeet Nation here, Amskapi Pikuni, and so he's going to tell us 3 encounters, and so we're just gonna get into it right now.
Hello, my name is KJ Bear Medicine. I'm from the Amskapi Pikuni, the South Blackfoot. Today, I'm going to tell a story about Bigfoot, and in our language, it's Atapiwi, which means a monster type of being. There's other names, but today we're going to use Atapiwi. So many years ago, back the time frame would probably be like about the late 50s, early 60s. One of my grandmas had 2 twins, and she had to change them all the time. Of course, changing kids. So as she was changing one night, she looked out the window, and there by her window was a big being peeking in. And he had kind of eyes that you could see like this in how you look at night,
Like
you
glowing.
see these eyes, yeah. And he was hunched down, peeking in like he was tall. And she screamed and she hollered, "Atapiwi, Atapiwi!" And my grandpa, he said, "That's that thing. It's peeking in that window again." And he told his boys, he says, "You guys go see what that is. Go chase it away." And so my uncles, they took off out, and they start chasing this thing through the trees. And as they ran through the trees, this thing was cracking branches running through, and it's in big.
Mm-hmm.
And so they chased it over toward this area south of Star School called Pine Ridge. And that's where we all stayed, was by the river bottom, and Pine Ridge was south of us. So Pine Ridge is kind of linked on to the Rocky Mountains. And so this thing, or whatever it was, Bigfoot, Atapiwi, had a large territory to cover and walk. And it must have got interested in the community there, seeing the lights and probably some of the food. And my uncles, they chased that thing toward that route. And they lost track of it by the river and across the river a little bit. So as they turned and came back, they made it back to my grandpa's house. And the next morning, they went out looking to see if they could see any tracks. And they found tracks with big feet. And they also found a little wallow where something was laying there, like it was sleeping or hiding or whatever. But it must have, all this time, it must have been just looking in the window, and it had a place to lay. And this must have been happening all through the river, because a lot of the people in that time, in the 60s and 50s, they stayed down toward the creek because there was no refrigerators. They used the water to cool their food in baskets or whatever, and that's why they stayed close to the river. Plus, there was no running water. They had to use the river for water to cook in and for other things. And so when this happened, it was probably happening all along the creek. And for the being, or for the Atapiwi, and so when this being would go through that, it was probably all throughout. And there must have been other people that seen it, but for that particular night, my gram seen it peeking in her window. And after that, ever since we was kids and growing up, of course, these girls here that's interviewing weren't around her yet. They were not even born. So
we were way too young.
Way too young, and
not even thought of.
Yeah, not even thought of. And so they heard the story only through stories, but we actually experienced that. So that was really an intriguing thing back in that time, because a lot of our people were superstitious, and they well, it's a spirit, like that, and it was really intriguing to them. And so after a while, my grandma moved up on top of the hill after the 64 flood, so they no longer had to deal with any of those occurrences no more. But they still had the story, and so the story goes through our families generation after generation. Tonight, I just wanted to share a song, kind of like a hospitable thing, we're talking about some stories from the early 50s and 60s, and I got a lot of songs, but I just wanted to share this particular one for just to be sharing it with these girls here.
We're back with our second story that KJ is going to share with us, and we hope you guys are enjoying the video, and because we sure are. We're enjoying these stories.
This has been a really good evening.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. So I'm just going to turn it back to KJ and let him tell the second story.
So the second story happened in the south part of the reservation, and we call it the Heartview area. And there was some old people that lived out there, and they were already in cabins, and there was already ranchers coming on the reservation. I'd like to say circa 1900 or something like that, in that general area. Reservation was just new, but they lived in cabins, and these old people were really hospitable. You arrive at their house and they'll tell you to come in and eat or give you a place to sleep. And that's what happened in this particular time. There was an old lady that come to their door out of the brush trees, and she had a bundle on her back. And so as these old people saw her, they said, "Come in." They were talking Blackfoot, and they were, "Come in, have some food, and you could rest here." And that old lady didn't say anything. She wouldn't say anything. She just nodded her head like this or like this and whatever. What she was like, she understood. And so she came in, and what was really intriguing about the appearance of this old lady was she had on kind of like tattered clothes, but her hands and her arms were all hairy, and right on her neck there was hair. Her face and her legs were what you could see. Her legs was hairy, and automatically they called her Atapiwi. And Carolyn used the word Emoyitapi, a hairy person or a hairy one. You could call her that too. And there's many words to describe that Bigfoot or Sasquatch, but we call them Atapiwi and Emoyitapi. Well, as these people invited her in, she came in and they told her to sleep in a corner. They made a bed and they gave her some food. And even though she had food there. Throughout the night, they could hear her fooling around over there, rustling around, and they could hear chewing sounds, like she was chewing on something. They thought it was the food. And the next day, when it was breaking daylight, she got up and left, but she left her little bag, sack there, bundle. And when they went over to look, there was a little baby body there, and all the meat was off, and there was baby bones there. So in reality, she cannibalized that little baby, just like a wild animal. And she just left that stuff there, and she got up and she walked out. And they, not long after that, they heard some hollering, hooting and hollering. And they went to go investigate. And there was these cowboys, they were trying to rope her, and she grabbed that rope and dragged him off the horse. And then she took off up into the trees. It's the last time anybody ever seen
her. Oh, wow. I heard somebody tell that story, like, I think just recently. I can't remember who it is, but I heard that similar story, like, way back. And so you kind of nailed it around 1900.
about that.
Yeah, probably late 18, early 19.
Ugh, that is scary. It's like
Kind of like that story.
weird.
Ew. It's
But just
disturbing.
think that if these stories have carried on that long,
Mhm.
there had to be something to that story,
Yeah.
that it would carry on from generation
Mm-hmm.
to generation, and it's just. And did you say these were your relatives?
Yeah. This is an older guy. I don't know if he was born in that time, or if he was a small boy. But the gentleman is still living in this time, and he's pretty up there in age. He's an older guy.
Yeah.
But if I can add something with our tribe and how we were a long time ago, if somebody did something wrong, they were kicked out of the tribe. And the explanation for that particular story, one explanation I heard was that this was probably a person that was kicked out of the tribe years ago and staying on her own out in the brush. She just learned how to live like that, and she got hairy. But before she got kicked out, they figured that she got pregnant, or that she stole a baby someplace, but somehow she had that baby. And she just learned to live out there, and she got hairy just for the elements. That was one explanation, but I don't know if that's it, because it could also be the Atapi, the Sasquatch. So there's going to be many explanations to those things, and it's just up to you which one you want to believe.
Well,
but I believe the Sasquatch one.
I kind of believe that too, for the fact that saying that she had this baby and that she possibly stole the baby. And when we were kids, like I was telling Lonnie, my
that was
grandma
common.
Carrie would say, "You guys get in here, and Moitapi's gonna get you. That hairy man, he's gonna steal you and take off with you. You better get in here." So that was how they got us inside, at night when we're running around and playing.
Yeah.
And so there must have been something to that story of scaring kids to say, "Come in," because maybe years ago they did have kids that came up missing, and that were stolen.
Yeah.
So, yeah. That's something.
These girls really got quiet, dude.
Boy,
I know.
This is me on their mind now.
I won't be able to sleep.
I am not going out looking for this
Nightmare.
creature no more.
I got nightmares in my head, I fear that the thoughts build up until I can't hear, that my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper.
You know, as KJ was talking about what happened to his grandma and grandpa, and in uh, the location it is kind of, like you said, down in the river bottom.
Mm-hmm.
Well, years later, probably back in the 70s, we lived down there, and we lived in would have been my great grandfather's cabin. And so we didn't even live, probably not even a half a mile from where KJ's grandfolks lived. And we lived in that other cabin. And one night, my mom and dad could hear something coming through. They thought it was like a wild animal. They didn't know what kind of animal. They didn't know if it was a bear or if it was like mountain lion or something. But they could tell something was coming through there, but it wasn't making noise.
Yeah.
You know, it was just the footfall and, but it wasn't like screaming or anything like that, growling. And our dogs, they said they just went wild. They were just barking and just going crazy, but they could tell like they'd run away and then come back, run away and come back. And then finally, we had a dog named Lady, and she was little, like those border collies, so she wasn't very big. And my dad said they were laying there just kind of listening, and all of a sudden, something just threw Lady up against the side of the house, and they just heard Lady yelp, and then and so they didn't want to get up because they didn't know what it was. They just kind of stayed there. And then later on, they got up and checked, and Lady was okay, but whatever it was just threw her against the house.
And a bear couldn't do that, right? And nothing really could do that, right?
Well, if a bear,
I guess the only thing you could think of that would do that would be like maybe a moose or something, kind of like, don't you think? I mean,
yeah. So I'm not saying that it is Bigfoot, but it was kind of odd the way Lady flew up against the house.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is they couldn't hear, like, whatever the animal wasn't grunting, wasn't screaming, wasn't growling, wasn't making any noise. It just was coming through like quietly. But
so that's really interesting, because it kind of, two things. One thing that you just said just now, you guys being those close proximity down there. But if you guys remember the story last summer of Arlen Edwards and along that creek area, so that's the same area of where these guys lived. And so I'll put a link above to link you to the story of Arlen in that same area where he found the footprint last summer, or was it the summer before?
It was a couple
summers ago, yeah.
But if you watch it, you get an idea of what the land
kind of what that
like.
area
area looks like.
So, and another interesting thing I thought about is when KJ was telling this story of like that time frame, 50s, 60s. Well, Craig Falcon has a story, and we'll link that one up there too, is that about that. Well, it's not in the same area, but it is, because it's all on the reservation lands. And when he was little and seen that thing peek in at the window, did you see that story?
I think I did.
Yeah. So that just kind of came to mind when you were telling that story.
And that was around that same time frame.
Yeah. Pretty close proximity of the peeking in the window thing.
Yeah. Ooh.
So with all this talk about Bigfoot, there's all this reality to the stuff here. And one of the realities that people need to watch out for is that when I hear the cries, some of the cries that I've heard on some of the documentaries and other movies that I've seen of Bigfoot, they have this shrill high cry. And when you hear that, make sure that it's not a mountain lion, because mountain lions sound like a woman crying. And if that's what it is, then you got to be careful, because they're stealth stalkers, follow you.
Mhm.
So you could hear the cry way over here, and just in a little time, you'll be someplace in your proximity.
Mhm.
So when you guys are all looking for Bigfoot or anybody, make sure what you hear is not a mountain lion,
Mhm.
because they're very dangerous.
Mhm. And they can make different sounds
Yeah.
too. They can sound almost demonic
Mhm.
too.
Yeah. It's kind of like it's like a woman wailing. If you ever hear these Indian women when they wail after the death of their loved one,
Mhm.
they got this cry.
Mhm.
Do you guys ever hear that?
Yeah.
Yeah, that cry. That's what that mountain lion sounds like. And sometimes people think they're getting spooked, and it's kind of like a splash of reality when that thing comes very close to you, and you know that it's nobody crying, but it's a mountain lion.
Mm. Yeah, mountain lions can be pretty scary.
Spooky, and we got numerous out there in the Star School area.
Mm-hmm.
So one time I was driving out, it was just a early evening, and this great big mountain lion come hopping out of where the bridges before you get into Star School. 2 bounds, it was across the road. That's how big he was. Great big guy, and I think that somebody shot him. I think because they got one in the casino over here up on the top there. There's a mountain lion up there, and that could very well be him because they're where they roam is a large territory.
Mm-hmm.
And he could have been someplace other and got shot there, and that's probably the same one that burns.
Even here, right here, North Browning, there's been sightings
Yeah.
right here, and then people, that have little dogs.
Yeah.
Their dogs have come up missing.
Yeah, and that's what's dangerous thing about it, especially in that area here, is they'll think they're kids.
I know.
They'll think they're that.
Mm-hmm.
And today's Friday, the what is 18th? 5th. What am I?
It's Cinco de Mayo. It's Cinco de Mayo.
Cinco de Mayo. Well, today's Friday the 5th, 2023. Just last week in this general area, they seen a mountain lion on the north side of Browning, or east side of Browning. It was bothering some people's horses, and they had to chase it away. Tonight, I wanted to tell a story that was told to me by an older relative. It's not from here, but it's up in the Washington area. It's on the White Swan Reservation. And the story goes where these 2 guys were going up to look for a place to cut wood. And as they got to the area, they walked up into the brush, and there was a split in the trail. One guy went this way, and the other guy went this way. And this one went downhill, and this one went uphill. And so the guy that went uphill was walking a ways back, and up in the White Swan areas, you got these logs that are probably about as big as that, the base, and they kind of go real low like this, but they're tall, they're huge. And it's the same kind of tree here, white pine, but it's bigger. And there was one laying down like this, and all of a sudden he heard somebody snoring. And he thought, I wonder who is that? Somebody else must be looking for wood. And he thought, well, I better go check on him. Maybe I'll wake him up. And so he was looking, and he finally located it. And this is the kind of spooky part. He says when he peeked over the log, he said there was this big hairy guy laying there, and right away he thought Sasquatch. He looked over like this, and the thing had its head like this, and it was snoring. He said what was really intriguing about that is when he'd snore, he said this little piece of hair would just kind of go up like this. And he looked for a little bit, got a better look, and then he slowly crept back down. And then he broke and ran down the trail, find his partner. When he got to his partner, he says, I need you to verify something for me. We got to go back up that trail. He said, what is it? I seen Sasquatch. And I said, oh, no, I'm not going back up there. He said, just come back up there. I got to let you see it too. He said, no, I don't want to. And he said, so I didn't want to go back up there either, is what this guy says.
Yeah.
Alone. So they said, well, let's get out of here then. So they took off back to their vehicle and they headed out. And when this guy talks about that, it's just really just like he was right there. Mm-hmm. And so that was their encounter with the Sasquatch or Bigfoot.
That's a close encounter.
A very close encounter.
That's scary. What year did you say this happened?
This would be back in the 80s, running the 80s, yeah. And when those people go up, I stayed there for a while and I got to go get wood with some of these people. And they carry a whole bunch of stuff with them. Mm-hmm. And when they go up and start cutting, out of these big trees, they cut like about 4 or 5 blocks, and that suffices them for a while. Those trees are so huge. So when this Bigfoot took refuge there for a nap, he must have thought nobody was going to find him, but his snore gave him away. Mm-hmm. So when this guy looked over and seen that Bigfoot laying there, he said, every time I hear people talk about Sasquatch, he remembers his encounter.
Mm-hmm. That's the way I am too. Like when I hear Bigfoot stories and I watch documentaries and I see things on TV or I hear other people talk about their encounters, I always think of mine. I always think of what I saw. And it's just like it's with you forever. Mm-hmm. You'd never be able to forget what you saw.
When we get to heaven, we're still going to have those thoughts.
Yeah.
We're going to ask God, what was that? And he'll tell us.
Yeah. We'll finally know what Bigfoot is.
Mystery will be solved.
Yeah. So, but not right now. It's too much fun getting
Still fun to go search and look and get scared.
Yeah.